Good day. If ever there was a franchise that was absolutely perfect for a huge series of first-person shooters, Warhammer 40,000 would be it. So why are there so few first-person shooters made for that setting, and why are pretty much all of them terrible? Or, if not terrible, passable? Today we're looking at a game that should be great. You would think it would be. Today we're taking a look at Warhammer 40,000 Boltgun.
You know, with a title like that, you would think that this game would be great. Hell, the iconic 40k gun is the title. But no, it's not visceral, it's not fast-paced, it's bloody boring. Warhammer 40k Boltgun was developed by Ariok Digital and published by Focus Entertainment on May 23, 2023 for PC and all modern consoles. This is a first-person shooter that is meant to ape the classic first-person shooters of the 1990s. And it does! Sadly, it only mimics the bad ones. In this game, you play as a Space Marine of the Ultramarines chapter. Damn you, Matt Ward, your stench persists to this day! You have all your classic Space Marine weapons. You got your chainsword, you got your bolter, you get a few other weapons in addition to your trusty bolter. In most of the novels, the Space Marines just have the bolter since it's so useful against all sorts of opponents. You got your shotgun, which I don't necessarily associate with a Space Marine, but it works as well as a shotgun should. And finally, you get a plasma rifle, and this is pretty good against the more powerful enemies. The plasma rifle does not overheat and explode, thankfully, so that's one less thing to worry about. Thankfully, the weapons in this game are good. However, what you use them on, not so good. Now, what is good is the fact that you don't have regenerative health, and there are plenty of power-ups and secrets to be found all throughout the fairly impressive levels. So, yeah, the biggest problem in this game are the enemies. They are really boring to fight. Now, I know, you're supposed to be playing a Space Marine. You're basically a walking tank. But this is also a video-based game, and so I'm supposed to be having fun here, people. But when your enemies do scratch damage, have very limited animation frames, so all they do is just kind of waddle around at you, it gets boring fast. This game is pitifully easy if you have any brain power whatsoever. There are certain areas where the game can get difficult, but most of the time you're just walking forward and shooting a few bastards here and there. Now, it wouldn't be so bad if these enemies could actually do damage to you, but since it's just scratch damage, it's pretty much just a walking simulator. This is Warhammer 40k. Cultists and lesser chaos enemies are better fought by a weaker protagonist than a Space Marine. If there were a shit ton of enemies, okay, that would be fun, but sadly you have weak enemies and they only come at you in small numbers, and the game features a lot of dead space, and thus my id is not tickled. Ariok, where is the first-person shooting in this first-person shooter? This footage was painful to even record as I was just not engaged with what I was doing, and that's the problem with these so-called boomer shooters. Unless they can match the chaotic and exciting natures of the classic legends of the past, all you got is a modern, boring game with crappy graphics. And ooh boy, these graphics be super crappy. I know this is a boomer shooter of the lower order, but man, did they have to go this far to be super old, bro? Because we gotta remember that classic shooters didn't look old, they looked like what the graphical tech could provide at the time, and thus a lot of them looked better than this. The enemy sprites lack weight and give a very flat performance and lack proper detail. The weapons look okay, but once again, they look worse than they really should. In my mind, a classic-inspired shooter should aspire to have the best graphics possible inside the limitations of the classic mold, meaning we don't need super pixelated bullshit like this. Sound is also a major letdown. The explosions are weak, and the bolt gun sounds weaker than my 1022, and never approaches the bloody rocket lawn chair it should sound like. The bloody Tau Fire Warrior bolter sounded better than this. In the game, we got some VA work, and it's perfectly alright. The soundtrack for the game is face-melting. This soundtrack comes from D-Rock's album Oblivion, published by Warhammer Records in 1991. Yes, Ariok did something right and licensed some music that is kick-ass. D-Rock's Oblivion album is nothing short of amazing, and is definitely worth listening to even though this game is terrible. My favorite track on D-Rock's Oblivion album is Noise Marines. Story is told in a few pixel art cutscenes, and it's there. I want to hate it though. The game takes place on Graia, the planet from the first Space Marine game. You are a follower of the spiritual liege Matt Ward, and you gotta go back to the planet to crush a chaos uprising. Lame. The Warhammer 40k setting has a million known worlds that you could have been fighting on, and yet we're back on bloody Graia? Also, Chaos Cultists, really? Oh yeah, there were a few Chaos Space Marines here, but they're, as the Brits would say, piss easy to kill, when in reality, a Chaos Space Marine should be a mini-boss. Well, unless your name is Case, but that's no excuse, damn it. I had a harder time killing a bloody Baron of Hellas Doom guy than I do killing a goddamn Chaos Warrior. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I want to love this game. I've wanted a first-person shooter where you play as a Space Marine for years. Sadly, this is pretty much the only run-and-gun styled first-person shooter where you play as a Space Marine, and sadly, it's just terrible. It's barely run and gun, it's more like waddle and shoot, I guess, because there is no challenge that's concomitant with being a Space Marine. It's just shoot, cultist, keep walking. It's the most boring first-person shooter I've played in a long time, and I'm not really sure why it had to be this way. How hard would it have been to have had the enemies at least to have some degree of challenge? This is just an exceedingly dull game. I suppose you could fix it with modding, although I highly doubt this is going to inspire a modding community. Really, all you gotta do is increase the enemy damage and spawn count, and then it'll at least be somewhat serviceable. As you might imagine, I do not recommend this game at all, even if you are a Warhammer 40k fan. Yeah, I know, we've all been waiting for that Warhammer 40k first-person shooter where you get to tear shit up as a Space Marine, but this ain't it. Yeah, the gameplay in this video might entice you, but believe me, when you boot this game up, you're gonna know something is wrong real fast, and it's gonna bore you to tears. Really, we needed a Warhammer 40k game developed by Raven Software. Raven Software were the masters of first-person shooters in the early 2000s. They were able to make some high-quality Star Trek first-person shooters. Star Trek, a series based around peaceful coexistence. Imagine what they could have done with Warhammer 40k! Imagine playing a Raven Software game where you play as either a guardsman or a Space Marine. Imagine how complex that gameplay would be. Imagine how awesome the enemies would be. Alas, Raven never got the license for whatever reason, and I feel like that is one of the great missed opportunities of gaming.
Yeah, I'm sorry to report, we got another pretty bad Warhammer 40k FPS. The best this franchise ever got to a good FPS is the very low-budget Warhammer 40k Necromunda, and that game got pretty dull pretty fast. Until we finally get a good Warhammer 40k FPS, I am General Otz, wishing you good. Fire Warrior, I guess, and good Space Marine, even though it is a third-person shooter, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.